Welcome to the Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community, a space where justice meets action and community voices rise. Each episode, we bring you stories from the front lines, changemakers, disruptors, and everyday heroes who are building a more just, equitable, and liberated world. This is more than a podcast. It's a call to listen, learn, and move together. You were just listening to music from the incredibly talented Stephen Kong. You can find him on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today we have with us Sheryl Hauk. Sheryl is a lifelong music educator, advocate, and author of Piece by Piece, a memoir of survival, resilience, and the power of creativity. After more than 4 decades directing choirs and mentoring students, she now uses her voice to speak about trauma recovery, resilience, and the role of creativity in building a life. Through her writing and advocacy work, Sheryl is committed to changing laws, supporting survivors, and empowering others to reclaim their stories, piece by piece. Well, hi, Sheryl. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this platform with me. I think you do incredible work. You have such a beautiful and powerful story, and I really can't wait to delve deeper into that and explore that more. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I had a weekend. I directed a musical of a small school. So we had 3 shows and I do all the conducting of it. So, today I'm getting back into regular life. So
Okay, no, that's
maybe
beautiful.
that is regular life. I'm not sure.
No, that's wonderful. I hope that went well for you. But just starting off, so you've spoken that you spent 40 years as a music educator before becoming a public advocate. So what first compelled you to share your story so publicly?
Well, I have a really interesting story. So I went and, helped kids find their voices in music education for 40 years. And I have a brother who still lives in Hawaii. And he came to visit me and he's mentally ill. And a long story, you can read it in the book, but I had to take him back to Hawaii and I hadn't been there for 25 years. And the psychiatric team of the state of Hawaii came to me and said, "We know your story. And by the way, we're changing SOL, statute of limitations. We think that your story could help us." And I'm like, well, first of all, how do you even know my story? Because I haven't told it. And second of all, oh, wow, I always assumed that whenever I was ready, I could sue my abuser. I just always assumed it. Well, that wasn't the right thing. And so I took the lawyer's card and I went home, sat on it for about 4 months. And then I called him and said, if this can help other people, I will do this. So the first step in that was to sue my abuser, to set a precedent to change those SOLs. And then I slowly, and it wasn't an overnight thing, I slowly found my voice. I hadn't told my children. I never talked about it with my husband. My children were grown by the time I got to that point. And I just slowly started to have to tell it. And it wasn't comfortable, but as time went on and how important it was to be an advocate for social change and justice of survivors, it became louder and louder. And then eventually, I worked on for about 10 years the SOLs in the state of Hawaii, the state of Michigan, and the voice wasn't loud enough. It just hasn't in 10 years changed drastically, seemed like it was a no-brainer to me. And so I thought maybe writing this book would help with that, for people to understand what it's like to be a survivor. Because 1 in 5 of us women are survivors of childhood sexual abuse. So that's kind of how I found my voice. And then it just slowly gets louder.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And, I love how you took adversity and not just overcame it yourself, but also used it as a way to empower other people, because I am sure that there's a lot of people who can take inspiration and get courage from listening to your story. And, I'd love to talk with you more about your memoir too. So, your memoir, Piece by Piece, centers creativity as a pathway to healing. So what role did music play in your survival and recovery?
I think that music is kind of, and I hate to say this for religious people, but it was almost my God. It was almost the way that I could relate to God and survive. So when I was a child,
Yeah.
I would practice for hours, or I would, something would happen,
Hmm.
and that was my go-to. And in high school, I was in the choir, and I was in the state choir, and
Yeah.
I played the piano for another choir, and it just the endorphins it caused, I didn't know at the time, to
Hmm.
counteract those cortisol, just kept me healthier than I would have been both mentally and physically. And I went on to major in music, and not really knowing how important it was for my survival. But I
Yeah.
found, as I then became a music educator, and the summers would come, because I would conduct for 5 hours, 8 hours a day,
Hmm.
and make music with these incredible young people, and share music with them as a way to get through hard things. I
Yeah.
eventually learned that in the summer I was getting down, depressed, and I wasn't really in the same place as I was when I was sharing music. And
Okay.
eventually I identified that creativity, the making the music, the sharing the music, was counteracting that cortisol,
Hmm.
that helping other people, all of those things together as time went on, really helped heal me. And am I
Yeah.
100% healed? No, but I am doing more than surviving now. And I think that
Yeah.
that's where we want to be. We want to be enjoying our grandchildren. I'm
Right.
63 years old, so I have grandchildren. I want to
Yeah.
I want to celebrate the good days of just hearing my dog bark. When you're in survival mode, you don't get to do that. And music really helped me do that, as well as finding my voice.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I don't know what it was like for you, but I could imagine it taking courage to like share your like story so like publicly and everything though. But so for survivors listening who may still be silent, maybe they might want to also share but still have that silence that they're feeling. What did it cost you to speak out? Like, do you feel like there's any risk to speak out? And then
Oh,
also
there's
at
a
the same
lot,
time, yeah,
lot of
also at the
risk.
same time, like,
Yeah.
do you feel like there was like benefits for you speaking out as well? Yeah, I'd love to hear both like what it cost you as well as like what it gave to you.
Yeah, I think the cost is people's reactions.
Okay.
You think that it is just a no-brainer, that people would understand and
Hmm.
want to find accountability for this kind of thing. Um, and that's not necessarily true. Even my family has a hard time with me writing a book and talking about it. They want to keep it private, and that causes sometimes you're not part of the crowd, or that
Right.
person's mouth is too loud, or we want to be careful to be around that person. She's an
Hmm.
abused person. That's not easy. And I want to go back a little bit and say that. For those survivors that are listening, you don't have to find your voice like mine. You don't have to make it a public thing. You just need to know it's okay to take your time. And when you do find your voice, it may just be telling yourself you're a survivor, not a victim. You're a survivor, and you're still here, and you're still important. I think, you don't have to be me, someone who writes a book or testifies in front of a committee in legislation. You can just tell a friend, or just tell yourself. I've had a lot of women in their 70s that are my friends, who have come to
Hmm.
me and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm a survivor, and I've never told anybody." And I just say to them, "Thank you for sharing that with me," because that's all
Yeah.
they're ready for. But that's important, because then you find your voice, and you're not a victim anymore, that you are that survivor. I think the benefits are so many. One, to help other survivors and get to talk to them and know you're not alone, but also to be aware that we have power as adults to put prevention education, to share with those 1 in 5 in my classroom that I didn't even know, that music could heal them and make them And it's not just music. Creativity is writing a book or making art or doing slam poetry
I
or
love that.
writing a rap or, there's so many creative things. I see the picture behind you of your daughters. That's so creative of her.
Yeah.
And so that's the positive part. It's all of those people who've said to me, I'm a survivor too, for the first
Yeah.
time. It's the benefits of we have changed some laws, not to the
Mhm.
extent that I think that our system needs to. California is really ahead of many
Okay.
of the states in the United States. Hawaii has made it retroactive, meaning anyone who was abused before July 1st, 2024 cannot sue. It's a problem that we have with the Epstein situation where
Right.
there's no accountability. In states that they cannot sue. And we know that criminally we have statute of limitations that really are small. So when I was growing up, someone my age, if they wanted to sue in the state of Hawaii, they would have had to do that before they were 20 years old. And most people are not ready at 20 years
Wow.
old to have a voice. And that's something I think our society in the United States do not and internationally don't understand. This is something we have to be ready to tell. And
Mhm.
part of the reason it happens so frequently is because pedophiles know this. They know they are not
Yeah.
going to have to be accountable. So that's the
Yeah.
good. I mean, that's actually a good thing that came out of finding my voice and going public.
No, and thank you for doing that. And yeah, you just bring up. I've been really frustrated too, like seeing how this is unfolding as well. And I hope that there is like more accountability for folks. But I know you talked about this a little before, but I'd love for you to speak more on it. So you testified in Hawaii to extend the statute of limitations for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. So can you tell us what was this experience like? So whether it's like emotionally or politically?
I think it was both. I mean, I
Oh,
think what's
okay.
interesting is that politically, I
Uh-huh.
never went into this to be in politics or to
Okay.
side with anyone or to take
Yeah.
everybody else's issues on my shoulders. Um, so I was told by the lawyer that there was going to be a 2-year window in the state of Hawaii, anyone could sue, but they wanted to extend that window. And so, because I'd already been to court and had my day in court, I just showed up. And I tell the story in a better way in the book, but I go and I show up and it was scary. It was really scary. I've conducted in front of lots of people. I've been to Carnegie Hall. But to be in front of a committee, it was the Judiciary Committee of the House, and tell my story in 2 minutes and get politicians. It was
Right.
really hard. My voice was shaking, but I tell the story that the only way that I can do things is literally to close my eyes and jump. And that's what I do. I close my eyes and jump. And so I
Yeah.
did that. We got that 2-year window extended to 4 years. And then everybody seemed to be okay with that. And I'm like, not okay. We have a lot of other people that need more time to find their voice. So subsequently, I would go back to Hawaii. Sometimes I'd fly there on a Wednesday, testify on a Thursday, and go home on Friday with my own money. And again, I'm not political, so I didn't belong to
Yeah.
anybody. I wasn't supporting anything except for let's have some accountability for survivors, which is 1 in 5. One of the other things that I talked about, and I learned from my legislator who worked with me. She's fantastic in Hawaii. She's gone from a baby legislator to now
Okay.
being the vice chair of the House. Is that this is also a money issue.
Okay.
So we spend a lot of money on mental health in the
Right.
United States, a lot, and we lose a lot of people. And the
Yeah.
longevity of people who are survivors are 20 years less than others. And it
Hmm.
just costs our society financially a lot of money. If we put that money into kids and taking care of them and
Right.
making sure in prevention, we'd be saving a buku bucks on
Right.
adults. And so that was another thing that I learned in the legislature because of Linda, that was an experience because of the Hawaii legislature that I began to understand that financially, if you don't understand anything else about abuse, financially, it is a smart political move to
Right.
support accountability, prevention, and supporting children who've been abused.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, no, thank you for sharing that. And, I really love that journey and also the perspective you brought up because it reminds me of my own journey as well. So when I was younger, I didn't consider myself political at all. Like I felt like politics kind of scared me, even overwhelmed me. But I think what I realized when I started growing older and started educating myself, getting more knowledge, I realized that the political is personal and vice versa. Our personal identities can even help to shape legislation, whether good or bad. And so, yeah, I think that's when I was like, no, even though maybe to my core, I might not feel like I'm political, like I have to educate myself because policies really do affect like ourselves and our lives and everything. And, I think it's beautiful that you, yeah, had that realization as well, like, doing all this kind of advocacy work. I think it's really beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you,
Uh-huh.
because if you didn't have a podcast and you weren't doing needs advocacy, people
Right.
wouldn't be able to hear this. And for a long time, this was a subject people couldn't hear. Still, they don't
Right.
hear it. It's the frustration in the Epstein situation in
Right.
Washington right now. They're not being political, they just want accountability.
Right, right. No, thank you for sharing that. And as you mentioned too, that the bill passed, but only moving forward. So, what did it feel like to witness progress that still excluded you and thousands of others?
It was frustrating.
Yeah, I
I
could
mean,
imagine.
I was very excited for children because one of the things I want is prevention. If pedophiles know they can't get away from it, then
Hmm.
there is some prevention. That was my number one priority. But it says to all of those survivors and all of those victims,
Hmm.
you're not valued
Yeah.
by our state because it's a state to state decision. You're not valued. We value those institutions. And my laws that I've worked on are very specific. They're under the age of 16
Okay.
from people who've abused or institutions that have abused with power. So they have
Right.
power over you, whether it is a parent or a teacher or a psychologist. They can
Hmm.
hold power over you, which is a little different than some other things. So that is really, you have these people who have power. How do
Right.
you make them accountable? And I I just I'm frustrated because we've worked
Yeah.
so long. It's state by state. I know that there's some things rumblings about making it federal, but
Hmm.
it has to be in your homes and your home states. And Michigan listens to me. I live in Michigan now, and they say, "Oh, you weren't abused in Michigan, so why are
Hmm.
you doing this?" Well, really, it's an
Yeah.
international problem, and so it's frustrating to go in and say, "Yay!" Everybody's cheering and patting each
Yeah.
other on the back, but there are millions and millions of survivors who've never even said out loud, you know.
Right. Actually, I had a question about that too. So, I've done a lot of social justice work myself too, and just seen like how systemically or even like on the micro level too, like who lives like are valued more, whose voices are valued more. I'm sure that you've also experienced this in your own work as well. So, how do legal systems unintentionally reinforce who pains count and whose doesn't?
Well, I think it depends by state because we have different
Okay.
cultures and states. In the state that I grew up in,
Hmm.
the Hawaiian culture, and I'm Haole, I'm white. People are going to look at me and say you don't understand it, but they really value what we call kapuna, older people, Asian, which is not the same in Michigan. Michigan does not value older people; they value
Right.
the children. So I think it's
Hmm.
what state you're in, but I have not found any communities except for other survivors that
Hmm.
support survivors of this. This is something people don't want to talk about. It's uncomfortable.
Right.
I wrote my book a little different than others. There's a lot of light, there's a lot of humor. And I did that on purpose because there's a lot going on in the world. People don't want darkness right now. And
Mhm.
I would like to say this, but you have to educate it because it's your grandchildren, it's your children, it's even you paying
Right.
higher taxes to take care of all of these medical problems. But people don't want that. And I'm hoping that in the book that I wrote, people will read it and laugh and feel tender, but
Mhm.
also understand the story without being traumatized themselves. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Um,
yes, I understand.
and so I think when people are fearful they're going to be traumatized themselves, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want it in
Right.
the limelight. That legislators, my legislator, I had one in the book. Her name was Representative Thielen, and she's retired. But boy, she was a voice. She was
Okay.
a champion of children and women and all kinds of
Mhm.
really important issues that we had. And I think that comes with a cost, like we
Right.
said earlier.
Right.
So how do we change that? That's a global question, isn't it? That everybody, how do we change this?
Yeah, and it's hard. That's why I appreciate like people coming onto this podcast who have like different levels of expertise than myself, though. Just like like what I'm hoping is that people will listen to these episodes and be more educated from folks who've actually been through those situations or actually done advocacy work as yourself. Because yeah, I think it is good for us to be educated, and I think a lot of these issues might be overlooked or people just not knowing what's going on out there. So I appreciate people like yourself, like telling your stories and encouraging people to speak out too.
Yeah, how do I put this? Um, I think that it's also important for just regular people who aren't political to
Right.
understand what it is like
Hmm.
to have 1 in 5 of the people around you.
Yeah.
What is that like? We see things differently. I have hypervigilance, I have
Hmm.
5 neurological conditions, and when people look at me, they're like, oh, look at, she's a really
Right.
successful person, look at
Right.
her family, and look, but they don't know what it's like to be us. And I think
Yeah,
that
exactly.
until the general population can feel that,
Hmm.
there won't be the change that we really want.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And, I'd love to hear your thoughts of this. But when you hear the word justice, what does this word mean to you today versus compared to before what you did your advocacy work?
Before, justice was just being able to live my life and not remember it and not talk about
Mm,
it and just
okay.
like be a normal person, right? Justice
Right.
was running away. But that wasn't justice. Justice is accountability to me.
Uh-huh.
Accountability
Right.
in so many ways. Accountability of our abusers, accountability in laws,
Hmm.
accountability in state organizations like CPS,
Uh-huh.
accountability in families.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
that's huge. Justice is huge. Accountability.
Right. No, I love that too. And something that else is that's really important to me is solidarity. I think it's really important, as we've talked before, like stepping up for each other and really taking a stand with each other. So with that, what does solidarity look like for you in that during that legislative fight? So in what ways did you feel supported? And, were there times that you also felt like you were alone in the struggle as well?
Most of the time I was alone
Oh, okay.
because
I'm
I
sorry
didn't
to
have
hear
a
that.
political affiliation. I
Okay.
will say, and if I did anything wrong, politicians, I didn't have a playbook, so they didn't
Mm,
always, oh, why did you do that? Because I would just be
yeah.
sit in offices of legislators, or I'd write emails, or I'd call them out on things like making an effective date the year 3000 and
Oh,
quietly letting a bill die and
okay.
not the world know. That happened a lot with my bills. They would get there, the legislation, both the House and the representatives would
Yeah.
vote for it 3 times, and it'd get to the end and they'd have a date that said 3000 and have to go to the special committee. It's
Okay.
already like, oh, that passed, but it never really did pass or never did get signed in a bill. So I really did most by myself. I think the story, and I tell it in, is when Representative Thielen, I was sitting in another representative's office. I wanted to talk to her for 3 days. I sat in the office
Okay.
3 days, and Representative Thielen would come in and out. And finally, she just came in there, and she's sat down and talked to me for like 20 minutes to an hour, pretty much letting that other junior legislator know that this was not cool. This was not the way to do it. So there have been legislators who've supported me. I met a really incredible lady with purple hair who advocates for children. She's in my book. Yeah, you can laugh. But there were people that I've met along the way who have been my backbone, and they were always women. So if you do read the book, please read the back of the book, The People I Thank, because these strong women were just amazing.
Yeah, no, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So, for advocates listening, how do we hold both celebration as well as grief at the same time? Because I couldn't imagine just those complexities, like feeling those victories, but at the same time still carrying that pain, carrying that grief. So, how can you hold both?
I hold both by finding the joy in my students and other women and other people around me, right? Seeing them find their own voices, seeing them become strong. I think giving yourself is really the strongest way to show that joy and that victory. Is it always easy to identify it? No. But the more you do it, the more you can see. I've taught for 41 years. I have some very famous students. I also have some students who are doctors and lawyers. And, I live in West Bloomfield, Michigan, and last week was very, very, very difficult for us. As you know, it was on international law with an active shooter in our temple. But some of those women and some of those families are families that I have been able to be a part of their life and to watch their reaction and how they came together as a community, not just my influence, but just the influence of being in our school district and the way everything came down. I think we all can find joy, no matter what has happened to us in the past, in seeing something like that really come together as a community.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And just in your perspective, what would true survivor-centered policy look like for you?
Oh, there would be no statute of limitations in any place in the United States when it comes to sexual abuse of a minor. I don't think criminally or civil suits. The other thing that I will never change is that we have in the United States Constitution, it says if you have a statute of limitations, and a perpetrator or someone who did something, like let's even say murder, and the statute of limitations runs out, you change that law. You say, oh, there is no statute of limitations. The Constitution says you still can't be charged for what you did in the past. That doesn't seem right to me. And so in my perfect world, that would be changed as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So, I just love how you talk about like rebuilding life piece by piece. So, what does resilience actually look like in real life? And yeah, I just love to hear like what that actually looks like for you.
I think that a lot of people think that, we live in a world where we have quick fixes these days, where you take a pill or you go to a spa or there's all these, we turn on a TV or a podcast and it has all the answers.
Right.
What I've realized over 63 years is that each experience we have gives us a piece of our building. And so it's every experience gives you a piece. And some of those pieces are going to be odd fixes. And I tell this story, I don't want to tell it because I want people to read the book, but my son had a tumor the size of a softball in his skull. And he is one who really taught me to identify that, hey, mommy, if it breaks, we're just going to build something new. So remember, sometimes people are going to kick over those pieces, but there's new pieces that are going to come out. And you need to take the opportunity to take each one of those pieces and build. It's not a quick fix. There isn't a quick fix of healing, but each one of those pieces can help you heal. Each one of those people standing in line, being kind to them, or each experience you have with a new person. So that's kind of what I try to show through storytelling in the book, that life is not a quick fix. Being a survivor is not a quick fix.
Right.
It's just piece by piece.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And also, like, it reminds me of this artwork, this Japanese artwork. I don't know if you're familiar with it, and I'm embarrassed to say, so I'm a Japanese American, but I forgot the name of the art. But it's like basically they have these, I think like pottery or like different ceramics or something might
Yes,
break. Have you heard of that?
exactly. I
Yeah, and then
know.
they put
Yeah,
it together using gold. So it's like something
yeah,
more beautiful, but it's still cracked, but it's together, but you don't want to like mask these. It's like, like
that
sometimes
is
like for me too, because
exactly.
I've been through a lot of trauma in my life too, and like wearing these scars with pride, like it is painful thinking back, but it's like these scars, these wounds, these broken pieces of myself actually makes me a stronger person today
It
versus like
does.
looking at it as like a deficit.
No, I understand. My daughter is a professor of architectural history with a
Okay.
BFA in Tokyo. I mean,
Okay.
she specializes in Japanese architecture
Oh,
and
okay, that's
art,
cool.
and so I wish I'd put that in my book, because you're
Okay.
exactly right. You're exactly right. Those
Yeah.
pieces of art in Japan where they specially glue things together, but they still celebrate those cracks.
Yeah. No, I like
Yeah,
that too. Because I'm thinking even when I break something, here on accident, like let me get super glue so I can't see the crack anymore. But I thought that was so beautiful. It's like,
it
let's
is.
like amplify these cracks and make them gold because they're beautiful. I was like, wow, that's so cool. Just to think like, that's an actual art form, but how that can also be like a metaphor for our healing journey as well. I was like, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, that is beautiful. My son put Legos together while he was dying. I'll
Okay.
tell the last chapter. And I was
Yeah.
cleaning up. We'd had surgery, and everybody's getting back to what might be a little bit normal. And I picked up his Millennium Falcon and I
Okay.
dropped it,
Oh no.
and it shattered.
Yeah.
And he stood in the doorway. I turned around, he's in the doorway, and he goes, "Mommy, that's okay. We'll just make
Oh,
something new."
that's beautiful.
So, yeah, that is what it's about.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That's so wonderful. So, in your decades as a choir director, you helped young people find their voices. So, how's this also shaped the way that you think about empowering survivors to also use their own voices?
Right. So, I mean, here's the trick.
Okay.
And my students, my choirs have won acclaim in their state and nationally.
Mm-hmm.
In order to find your voice, you have to be safe. It's the
Okay.
most personal thing you have, right?
Mm.
Your voice. You can play an instrument, or you can write something, but the most personal thing you have is both your singing voice and your speaking voice. No
Okay.
one has it alike, even if
Yeah.
it's your twin
Uh-huh.
DNA. So, in order to share that most personal thing, you have to find a safe, emotional, physical
Mm.
space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that building those spaces to educators, to people who want to help family members find their voice,
Mm-hmm.
or me to help them, why it was so important to write a book that was safe to read and not traumatizing, is
Okay.
where you have to start.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for sharing that too. And, just to share a little bit about this podcast. So, this podcast centers justice, action, and community. So, in your view, what do you think must change for justice work to truly be like liberatory for survivors?
Well, I think that laws have to change in the United States, and the only way that's going to do that is to make legislators accountable
Okay.
for changing those laws and using those laws. I think that's the number one thing that has to happen right now. Um,
Yeah.
and that's difficult. But the more voices, when I testified in 2016, I was the first and since only person who had testified being abused by their own father for 18
Okay.
years. And I'm not the only one out there.
Right.
So it's hard, but until we have our voices, nothing's going to change. And I'm only one voice. So I really think that survivors need to find their own voices their own way. But if there are other survivors out there like me, and
Yeah.
we start working harder at
Mhm.
making legislation that's more accountable, to me, that's how.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. You know, something else with this podcast I want to show is like how I was talking to you before. Like, I think it's important for us to stand up in solidarity for people, even if you feel like it doesn't affect you personally. Like, it might affect you indirectly as well. But, you know, I think as you were talking, I'm also thinking like it shouldn't just be on the survivors, I think, to move the needle. But, you know, with that, what responsibility do you also feel that communities and not just lawmakers have in supporting those who are harmed?
Yeah, I think it's a really important fact. One of the newer things that I'm doing right now is trying to
Mm-hmm.
put preventative education for both parents and children into communities.
Yeah.
And at least where I live, it's been hard. People don't
Oh,
want to talk about it. I think it's the community's responsibility
yeah.
to make sure. I mean, prevention's the best thing we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to make their communities safe, again, the word
Mm-hmm.
safe. We certainly in West Bloomfield made it safe when we had an active shooter. How can we do the
Okay.
same thing with the pedophiles that are in our midst? So I guess that's my answer. I want communities
Mm-hmm.
to also be accountable to making sure they have prevention programs, making sure that mandated reporters have good
Mm-hmm.
training to be able to see what sexual assault
Okay.
looks like. Because
Right.
often, as an educator, I didn't even know what it looked like till somebody trained me.
Right.
I think that's really important for communities.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that too. And I really appreciate how you're sharing your story. And I'm hoping that listeners listening to this episode or also reading your book can get more aware about this issue. But at the same time, I feel that awareness alone shouldn't be something to like help us make the changes that we want to see. So with that, how do we move from awareness to collective action on this issue?
Well, it's a financial thing, right?
Okay.
So,
Hmm.
where do our resources go? Do our
Hmm.
resources go to, we talked about this before, our resources go to children? Here where I live, you'll read about it. I'm involved with a place called Care House of Pontiac. They service
Okay.
about 250 kids in our
Hmm.
county a
Okay.
year. That's not a lot. They
Uh-huh.
give interviews in safe environments to kids. They give free counseling. They do all
Mm.
kinds of even housing, taking them out of bad situations. That's not a lot. 250 when in my
Right.
county right now it's reported that 1 in 3 children
Hmm.
are being abused. That's a lot.
Wow. No, that is
So
a lot.
I think what the way we move forward, not just awareness, is that we put our
Hmm.
money where our mouth is. We put
Right.
it into protecting our children, we put it into educating our parents, and we put it into prosecuting our prosecutor where I live. She's fantastic. We
Okay.
make sure that the cases are prosecuted before children even have to have a voice as
Hmm.
adults. I think it is our responsibility as adults to do that.
No, thank you for sharing that too. And I'd love to have you talk with the listeners as well. So, you know, how they might be able to step up even in the communities that they're at right now, like showing up where they are. So, if someone listening wants to support statute of limitations reform in their state, where do you recommend that they begin?
Yeah, so I think the first place they begin is called childusa.com. It
Okay.
is an organization that works and gives you information on statute of limitations. It is
Hmm.
out of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. It is a wonderful advocate. They hire lawyers. They work in all over the United States trying to change the statute of limitations. If you don't know what the statute of limitations is in your state, they have a database that is easy to maneuver and go in there and see. So I would say that that is the first place. On my website, SherylHauk.com, I have a resource page, both in the
Okay.
book and on the website, that gives lots of different resources, both in advocacy and as survivors, where you can go internationally. So it
Mhm.
has not just in the United States, but in Canada and internationally where we can go.
Right. No, thank you for sharing that. So, next I want to bring up that you were nominated for Life Changer of the Year for your advocacy. So, congratulations on that.
Thank
That's
you.
really wonderful. So, what does being recognized feel like when the work is still unfinished, though?
I'm almost embarrassed. I'll
Okay.
tell you.
Okay.
Some of I was in the middle of the advocacy, and I also got quarterfinalist for Grammy Teacher of the Year. And it wasn't just about the music education that I was doing, but also the advocacy. I almost felt embarrassed because I felt like I hadn't gotten where I needed to be. So yeah, that's I just won the International Impact Award for my book. And
Okay.
I want to use it to say, hey, look, it has credibility. But then I'm also embarrassed because I don't have the answers for everybody. And that's just an
Mhm.
honest answer to tell you.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that too. And as we've been speaking and as I've seen your bio too, I know that you've been through a lot. You've did a lot of challenging work as well, but what gives you hope? Like what helps keep moving you
Mm.
forward though? I'd love to hear more about that from you.
I love the word hope because to
Okay.
me, hope is what humanity has. Hope is
Oh.
number one. When I talk to people who are depressed or suicidal, or
Hmm.
I have to tell them that humanity does have hope. And right now, I know a lot of people don't feel like they have hope. So I hate to keep bringing that up, but
Right.
I think that hope is uh, being able to see the good in humanity, being able to see
Right.
that even if you've been through horrible times, as I did as a child,
Yeah.
there is light in humanity. And I try to bring that again in my book, but
Mhm.
it's not just in my book. It is in some of these women legislators and some of these women who are fighting for children's and survivors' rights. It's in I find hope when I watch my grandchildren.
Yeah.
I find hope when I see my students. When I say successful, you don't have to be famous. You can have your own families or your own life where you're I don't want to say happy. You're
Hmm.
content and you're not just surviving. And so for me, that's where hope is.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And, thank you so much for your time. I had such a wonderful time talking with you today. As I've mentioned before, you have such a powerful story. I think you're such an inspiration to people. And I'm really grateful that you took the time to share that with me on this podcast. But just as we're wrapping up, what does reclaiming your story piece by piece mean to you today?
It means that I don't have to be quiet and pretend I'm
Okay.
somebody I'm not.
Yeah.
That's what it means. I
Yeah.
get to be me and
Yeah.
I get to like me.
Yeah.
I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor
Hmm.
and that's who I get to be.
Yeah. No, I really love that. And thank you again. But just lastly, how can people find you if they'd like to connect with you? I know you mentioned your website, or are there other ways they could connect? And also where can they get your book if they'd be interested in getting
Yeah.
your book?
So Sheryl Hauk,
Hmm.
SherylHauk.com, has a lot of resources. If you want to contact me, there's a contact form in there. I look every day.
Okay.
I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. They're not private, so if you want to go search my name on those as well. And I really, if you just need someone to tell that
Yeah.
you want to use your voice, I'm certainly here. And so there's lots of ways. I'm out there. I'm digitally on the internet. So
Yeah.
please find a way. My book is available many places, but the easiest place is Amazon. If you don't go to Amazon, you can get it through Barnes and Nobles.
Hmm.
Um, It's available internationally. It's in bookstores at Schuler bookstores where I live. So there's lots of places, but again, the website SherylHauk.com has those links. You can just click and go to them.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again. I wish you all the best moving forward. You're doing such beautiful work. I think putting so much beautiful energy out there. And I love like also how you're saying how you have hope, despite everything that you've gone through. But yeah, I wish you all the best. I hope we could stay connected and I
Thank
hope
you,
that
Denise.
you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for being here and tuning in to Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community. Your presence in this movement matters. If today's conversation moved you, share it, talk about it, and keep the work going. Together, we're not just imagining change, we're making it. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and stay in the fight.
Every time I feel so mad and sad and bad, I say to myself, relax, lean back, it's a brand new day. And every time I feel so down that a frown is all that's on my face, I remind myself to take a breath, it's a brand new day.